Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. In 2016, in the city of Mendoza, Argentina, on January 10th, two young women, 21-year-old Marina Menargo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney, set out on a much-anticipated journey. This journey soon turned into a significant investigation in Latin America. Maria Jose Coney was studying economics at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina Menargo was studying speech therapy at Aconcagua University. Both were actively involved as volunteers, helping people who were struggling to find a place to live. Friends and acquaintances often described them as cheerful and deeply connected to their families. The two friends embarked on this trip with two others, but eventually went their separate ways. They started their journey on January 10th, and their route could be traced through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts until January 13th. The girls were already in a place called Equit by January 23rd, and their journey was coming to an end. Their Instagram posts hinted at their travel adventures and seemed like a farewell as they prepared to return to Argentina. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menargo still had about 10 days of vacation left, so they decided to extend their stay and headed back to Montevideo, marking the beginning of their Ecuadorian experience. On February 22nd, Maria shared a photo with Marina, and this would be the last post on her Instagram account. Around the same time, they contacted their families in Argentina, informing them of their plans to return. They were supposed to take a bus from Ecuador to Lima in Peru, spend a night at a friend's place, and then fly from Lima to Santiago, the capital of Chile, on February 25th. From Santiago, they would take a bus to their hometown, Mendoza, in Argentina. During this time, the girls informed their families that they might be difficult to reach due to poor phone signal. However, as days passed, their families grew increasingly anxious. There was no activity on Maria and Marina's social media accounts, and the families were unable to contact them. Marina's sister was the first to draw attention to their disappearance on social media, sharing a photo of the two girls and pleading for information regarding their whereabouts. Worried and desperate for answers, the families tried to ascertain if the girls had left the country and boarded their flight. Yet their attempts to obtain information from the airline representatives proved futile. The friends with whom they were supposed to stay before their departure also confirmed that the girls never showed up. Consequently, the families took the distressing step of contacting emergency services in Ecuador to report the disappearance. They also reached out to the Argentine consulate seeking assistance. The consulate stepped in on February 27th. Argentine authorities sent the fingerprints of both girls to Ecuador. This action was prompted by a discovery a few days earlier. On February 25th, an unknown woman's body was found in Montevideo and transported to Gil. By comparing the fingerprints obtained from the Argentine police with those of the unidentified body, they confirmed it was Maria Jose Coney. On Saturday, February 27th, after examining the area where Maria's body was found, the police discovered Marina Menargo's body. It was just 43 yards away from Maria's body. Both bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and secured with duct tape. According to Ecuadorian police information, Marina's body was harder to find initially because the criminal tried to conceal it by placing something on top of it. During the autopsy, the medical expert determined that Maria Jose Coney died from head injuries caused by blunt force trauma. She had injuries described in a certain way by the Ecuadorian authorities, along with a broken femur and toe. Marks on Maria's wrists indicated she was tied up. Marina Menargo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck and had similar wrist marks, suggesting she was also tied up. The report stated the girls passed away on February 23rd. Toxicological analysis revealed a significant amount of a drug used in psychiatric treatment in their blood. Given the circumstances of their death, the police concluded the girls did not voluntarily consume this drug, and they might not have been aware they had taken it. This suggested someone might have mixed it into their food or drinks. Just 24 hours after finding the second body, a significant development occurred in this case. However, it stirred mixed reactions among the girls' families. Ecuador's president and interior minister announced that the police had solved the case. They arrested 33-year-old Alberto Segundo Minaponte and 39-year-old Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, who confessed and provided details of how the events unfolded. Bloodstains were found in one of the accused Minaponte's house. Marina's mobile phone, backpack, and other items were discovered nearby. Besides the swift arrests, what surprised many was the immediate confession of the two men. This news caused a stir among those following the case. The men presented their version of events. Ecuador's interior minister, José Serrano, stated that the girls left the hotel where they had a room on February 22nd at 2 p.m. Allegedly, someone stole all their money at the hotel, so they planned to hitchhike to Lima. However, this version was disputed by the hotel owner, who claimed that no theft occurred. Maria and Marina's families also doubted this story, as the girls had credit cards with them. Even with a financial crisis, they could have used the cards. Yet, there was no activity on the cards. It remains uncertain whether someone actually stole all the money from Maria and Marina. Further unfolding events might shed light on this mystery. The minister mentioned the people who, I'd like to remind you, confessed their actions fully. Pan, one of the suspects, informed that around 8 p.m., Rodriguez informed him about two Argentinian girls at a bar. They all engaged in a conversation. In this conversation, Marina and Maria mentioned they were trying to reach Lima through hitchhiking, as they didn't have enough money for a bus. However, this version raises doubts. The girls had already purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago in Chile for February 25th. It doesn't make sense for them to hitchhike more than 1,000 miles, risking missing their flight. As mentioned earlier, their flight was scheduled for February 25th, and this conversation, according to Pan, occurred on the evening of February 22nd. Sounds suspicious, doesn't it? On the other hand, witnesses found by the local police confirmed these peculiar accounts. Since it was getting late and the girls needed a place to stay but lacked funds for a hotel or hostel, Pan suggested they stay at his place. The girls agreed. The police found a taxi driver who verified that he drove Marina, Maria, and Pan to Pan's residence. The image you see displays Pan's residence. According to information from Ecuadorian authorities, Pan returned to the bar and began drinking with Rodriguez. Meanwhile, Marina and Maria were alone in the house. The heavily intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Maria and Marina were not there. The police learned that the girls went to a nearby store to buy soda. The exact type of soda remains unknown. The police also found a witness, the store's cashier, who verified this. If this account is accurate, it implies that the girls still had some cash. According to Pan's statement, when the girls returned to the house, he stayed in a room with Maria Cani, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Monago. Pan admitted he attempted to coerce Maria Cani, but she resisted and tried to leave the house. He then grabbed a stick and hit Maria on the head, resulting in her instantaneous death. At the same time, a scream emanated from the other room. Upon entering, Pan witnessed Rodriguez ending Marina Monago's life. Rodriguez promptly fled the premises. Afterwards, Pan began contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. He tried to eliminate all evidence in the house, securing the bodies in plastic bags and taping them up. During the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported them to a desolate area close to the ocean, about 440 yards away from their home. Just a reminder, everything discussed here is based on the official account by Ecuadorian authorities. However, there was no explanation provided for the marks found on the girls' wrists. Additionally, the toxicological analysis revealed traces of a powerful substance in both girls' blood. Given these circumstances and the discrepancies in the case, the families of the girls began to question the Ecuadorian authorities' narrative. They believed this case might be linked to human trafficking, and the Ecuadorian authorities were concealing the truth. Marina and Maria's families had several reasons to doubt the official version. First, the girls had run out of money but didn't use their credit cards. Second, they were under the influence of drugs. Oddly, the only people who saw Maria and Marina that day were the ones confirming the authorities' account: the bar owner, a taxi driver, and a cashier who supposedly sold soda to the girls. It's worth noting that Mineta, the town where this happened, had around 5,000 residents. The families couldn't fathom why the bodies were discovered 2 days apart, merely 43 yards from each other. Moreover, it struck them as strange that Maria and Marina sought help from Pan and Rodriguez. With the sizable Argentine tourist presence in Mineta, it would have been more logical for the girls to approach someone from their own country for help. The brother of one of the victims mentioned seeing used syringes on the floor when the Ecuadorian police showed him the crime scene. Strangely, these syringes vanished when he inquired about them. Furthermore, these syringes were absent from the crime scene photos, and the experts who investigated the place denied their presence. According to the family, the two men were merely a facade for something larger, possibly involving human trafficking. Subsequently, the authorities arranged for a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. It was revealed that both defendants, Pan and Rodriguez, had changed their accounts multiple times. In one version, Pan denied involvement, claiming the actual perpetrator was an illegal substance dealer of Venezuelan origin residing in the vicinity. This man was known by the pseudonym El Chamo. However, this individual vehemently denied any connection to the events and offered to undergo a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample to prove his innocence. Several DNA samples were found at the crime scene, including DNA from Pan, DNA from the deceased girls, and several unidentified samples. These unidentified samples didn't match Rodriguez, the alleged second perpetrator, or El Chamo, who had been ruled out as a suspect after undergoing all the DNA tests. After the second autopsy conducted by Argentine experts, it was evident that both girls were in such a state that they couldn't defend themselves before their demise. Tragically, they had been forced into distressing circumstances. The autopsy also revealed other distressing details. Maria Jose had bruises and scratches on one side of her body, as if she had been thrown out of a moving vehicle. New test results again showed that both girls had taken a strong medicine used for mental health treatment. This drug suppresses a person's control over their actions. The events that unfolded after this sent shockwaves throughout Latin America. Unfortunately, as often happens, people blamed the girls for what happened. Not just regular internet users, but even some well-known public figures held them accountable. One of those who thought the girls were at fault was Ecuador's Deputy Minister of Tourism, Maria Cristina Rod-Era. Around the same time the news broke about Maria and Marina's passing, Berlin was hosting a tourism fair. During an interview with a German news agency, Rod-Era suggested that due to the way the girls traveled, something unfortunate was bound to happen sooner or later. She also mentioned she had never been to Mineta, implying it was below her social status. This was essentially blaming the victims at a governmental level, a profoundly distressing occurrence. After facing severe backlash for her comments, the Ecuadorian government apologized to Maria and Marina's families and fired Rod-Era. Among the most criticized was Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narton, who labeled the girls as easy targets, insinuating that such individuals influence others to commit harmful acts. After immense criticism, the doctor stated that people had misunderstood him and he never excused criminals from accountability. In response to the countless comments online blaming the girls, a student from Paraguay, Guadalupe Aosta, wrote a Facebook post on behalf of Maria and Marina. The post went viral, receiving 700,000 shares in its first week. The court proceedings kicked off on August 8, 2016, facing numerous setbacks in the case. The prosecutor changed 3 times, causing significant delays. Evidence-wise, the prosecution presented witness statements and over 200 pieces of physical evidence from where the incident happened. Police discovered the girls' belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the scene. During the trial, Pan maintained his innocence, stating that his confession was coerced by the police. This strengthened the family's belief that the Ecuadorian authorities were hiding something. Rodriguez altered his testimony, suggesting involvement of Colombian individuals linked to banned substances in the girls' demise. Early in the trial's first week, the prosecutor voiced suspicions of other individuals' involvement, pointing to the discovery of 3 additional male DNA samples at the scene, apart from Rodriguez and Pan's DNA. Ultimately, the court sentenced both Alberto Pan and Eduardo Rodriguez to 40 years in prison, the maximum penalty per Ecuador's laws. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities announced the arrest of another individual whose DNA was found at the scene, 34-year-old Jose Luis Perez Castro. His defense argued that he had resided in the house weeks prior due to a dental infection. The defense contended that the DNA match was due to innocuous contact with furniture or items he had touched earlier. Castro's defense weakened when a dentist testified, revealing that Castro had sought a note about dental issues weeks after the discovery of Marina and Maria's bodies. Despite claiming dental problems during the alleged time, Castro, still denying guilt, faced social media and legal battles. Despite their skepticism, the court sentenced Jose Luis Castro, akin to Pan and Rodriguez, to 40 years in prison. The families of the girls remained doubtful about the Ecuadorian authorities' narrative. They even asserted that Argentine police officers were involved in the investigation, casting shadows on the Ecuadorian version. However, Ecuadorian police maintained their stance, continuing the search for other men whose DNA was found at the house to this day. Story 2. We're diving into another chilling case. The story of Christy, Sean, and Joseph Codd. Ever wondered why someone would harm an entire family? It makes you question how well you really know the people around you, doesn't it? We often think our friends, colleagues, or neighbors have our backs, but sometimes there are wolves in sheep's clothing among us. They gain our trust only to exploit it later, causing unimaginable harm. Friendship is usually a source of joy and support in life, but tragically, sometimes those intentions lead to devastating outcomes. The tragic loss of Christy, Sean, and her husband Joseph Codd in 2015 profoundly affected the quiet provincial town of Lear, North Carolina. Their deaths marked one of the most brutal crimes in the history of the small community. At the time of the incident, the couple was eagerly anticipating the arrival of a new family member. However, what made the situation even more horrifying was the realization that their assailant was someone they knew well, trusted, and considered a friend. Furthermore, they were not his only victims. Christy, Sean aka Maria Sean Codd, born on September 3, 1976 in Madrid, Spain, was the only child of American military personnel. Her father, a U.S. Air Force soldier, frequently relocated with his wife and daughter due to his duties. As a result, the family moved from place to place, living in various European countries before returning to the United States. Christy started her education in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the family quickly moved to Texas, then to Illinois. Afterward, they spent several years living in Latin American countries. Living a nomadic lifestyle had its advantages for Christy. She learned multiple languages early on and got to immerse herself in different cultures and traditions. However, her teenage years presented challenges as she struggled to settle into new groups and make friends in unfamiliar places. Just as she began to adjust, it was time to relocate, leading to changes in schools and social circles. Surprisingly, these constant changes honed her communication skills. Christy effortlessly connected with people from diverse backgrounds and earned a reputation as a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. Moreover, she actively participated in sports such as gymnastics, swimming, and kickboxing classes from a young age. After finishing school, Christy's father retired from the military and they settled in Ballowy, Mississippi. Finally, finding genuine friends, Christy stumbled upon a new passion: cooking. She loved experimenting in the kitchen, crafting culinary delights that earned her admiration. This newfound interest led her to pursue culinary courses, much to her parents' expectation of her becoming a chef. However, Christy surprised them by discovering her knack for acting. With ambition and beauty on her side, she joined an acting academy and headed to Los Angeles. There, she embraced every opportunity that came her way, from commercials to theater performances. She even landed roles in prominent Hollywood productions, sometimes taking on risky stunts, including a minor part in the Terminator franchise. In 2000, after graduating from the academy, the young woman found herself without any significant acting roles. Despite her talent and looks, she shifted her focus to cooking and sports, turning them into a profitable business. Christy appeared on several popular culinary TV shows, gaining recognition and becoming a well-known figure. While she made it to the finals of Next Food Network Star, she didn't win due to mixed reviews of her culinary experiments. However, Christy wasn't discouraged. She attracted a large following on social media, where she shared her life and creations, promoting a healthy lifestyle and offering nutrition advice. She even developed exercise routines to stay in good physical shape. About a year later, Christy founded and began successfully developing her own catering company, which provided banquet services for various events and also retailed prepared culinary products. Her business was distinctive in that it focused on proper and healthy eating, and additionally, the menu featured her own original recipes which she created and perfected. Soon, the young woman contemplated starting her own farm, which would grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This would help her expand her business in the catering industry. At the same time, she conducted online courses on proper nutrition and developed several other projects. In 2012, Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, better known as JT, who worked as a casting director in television, responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. They first met at a studio in Los Angeles at the casting for a culinary show that the young woman wanted to participate in, and they instantly clicked. Joseph was nearly 7 years older than Christy, had been married before, but was in the process of divorcing at the time they met. He was utterly charmed by the beauty and charisma of this delightful blonde, and he began to court her. The young woman was not averse to his attention, and soon they began a romantic relationship. Joseph shared and supported the ideas of his beloved, and together they began to work on the project of their own farm. Soon after, the couple decided to leave Los Angeles and moved from sunny California to North Carolina. They sold Christy's quite successful and well-established catering business. Joseph sold his house in Hollywood, and they invested all the proceeds in buying a large piece of land in the town of Leicester. The couple acquired a spacious and cozy house, as well as a nearly 1-acre plot of land to realize their dream. The man continued to collaborate with TV channels, but now worked remotely, while the woman actively worked on developing her personal blog about proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. They were an ideal couple, with their relationship marked by love and harmony. Together, 3 months after the wedding, the newlyweds learned that they were going to become parents for the first time. Their joy knew no bounds. After the new year, during a routine ultrasound examination, the doctor told the couple that they were expecting a daughter. A few days later, during a phone call with her mother, Christ mentioned that they had decided to name their firstborn Skylar. Everything was going perfectly, and the pregnancy was progressing smoothly. But the couple's happiness was tragically short-lived. Christy was 5 months pregnant and actively preparing for the arrival of their baby. She almost daily called her parents who lived in another state, sharing updates on her well-being and chatting with her sometimes for an hour at a time. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother was unable to reach her daughter, but initially did not think much of it. The situation repeated the next day. Calls went through, but no one answered. Her son-in-law's phone also went unanswered. When, by March 15th, both spouses' phones were turned off, Christy's mother became alarmed. Since Christy and Joseph's parents lived in other states, they couldn't quickly check on their children's home to ensure everything was all right. Therefore, Christy's mother called a close friend of her daughter, a woman named Cecily, who lived nearby and could check on them at their home. When the friend arrived at the Codd residence, she saw that both spouses' personal cars were parked at the house. However, the front door was locked, and no one responded to knocks and shouts. The couple's phones had been off for 3 days, which was also highly suspicious. Through a window, Cecily saw that the couple's beloved dogs, who they cherished and would never willingly leave alone, were locked inside one of the rooms. The woman opted to stroll around the house and noticed that the back door lock had been forcibly broken, suggesting an attempted or successful break-in. She promptly notified Christy's mother via phone, who then promptly contacted the police. The arriving officers confirmed the break-in at the back door and found disorder inside, indicating a search for something. The family reported missing valuables, including the homeowner's jewelry box, and noted that the safe in the couple's bedroom had been tampered with. However, there were no signs of a struggle or evidence of the couple being forcibly taken. Moreover, the intruder had been careful, leaving behind no fingerprints or DNA evidence. The relatives clung to the faint hope that 45-year-old Joseph and his 38-year-old pregnant wife Christy were still alive, but the experienced officers were not optimistic in their forecasts. In the initial days, the investigation simply stalled. No clues or even somewhat significant evidence could be found. The missing couple had no enemies or ill wishes, and reconstructing what had happened was challenging even in broad strokes. The spouses' phones were left at home, last used on March 12th. Only incoming calls were recorded the next day, after which the devices died. The police decided to question the couple's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything strange or suspicious. Recently, an interesting detail emerged. A neighbor living across saw another local resident throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Codd's home on the morning of March 15th. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but when he learned of the couple's disappearance, he thought the information might be useful to the investigation. Checking the contents of the bins was no longer possible, as the trash had been taken to the dump just the day before, and now any potential evidence would need to be searched for there. But first, the police wanted to speak with the person who had discarded the strange bundle. It was revealed that the perpetrator was a 36-year-old named Robert Jason Owens, residing on the same street. He was familiar with the couple, and even regarded as a close family friend. Owens, a handyman, had assisted Christy and Joseph during their initial move. Over time, they developed a friendship, leading to Owens being invited to their wedding. While this seemed innocent enough, some locals characterized Owens as peculiar and unpredictable. Robert was called in for questioning at the police station on March 16th. Initially, he denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed ignorance about the mentioned bundle. Initially, there wasn't much evidence to charge him with beyond the unsubstantiated claim. However, the situation took a drastic turn later that evening, when the same large, peculiar bundle was discovered at the landfill. Inside were items from the missing couple's home, and Robert's clear fingerprints and DNA traces were found on partially burnt clothing belonging to the couple, as well as on a blanket and throw from their home, all stained with blood. This evidence confirmed the police's suspicions that Christy and Joseph were no longer alive. Doubts were dispelled when police searched the suspect's home and found charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove. Robert was then brought in as a suspect in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and the neighbor's pregnant wife. Despite his denials and inconsistent statements, he eventually confessed after several hours, and his admissions were truly shocking. He admitted to the double fatal incident but claimed it was accidental. According to him, on the evening of March 12th, he opted to pay a visit to his friend's house. However, he veered off the road to avoid hitting a dog, which led to his car getting stuck in the mud. He proceeded to walk to the Codd family's residence and sought their assistance in pushing his car out. The Codd couple, being helpful and responsive, agreed to help. As they were pushing the car, Robert, seated behind the wheel, accidentally mixed up the gas and brake pedals, causing the car to lurch forward and strike the couple. In a state of panic, fearing he would be blamed for their injuries or deaths, he made the decision not to alert the authorities or seek medical aid. Instead, he chose to conceal the incident. Robert asserted that he returned to the Codd family's residence, forcibly entered through the back door and retrieved blankets from the bedroom, uncertain of the victim's survival. He proceeded to wrap the bodies in the blankets and place them in the bed of his pickup truck. He then transported the bodies to his own home, where he dismembered them in his bathroom, using a saw and a small axe. Subsequently, he ignited his stove and systematically incinerated portions of his friend's remains, hoping for complete combustion. Strangely, he opted not to burn the blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear, instead bundling them into a trash bag and disposing of them in a dumpster, assuming that once the garbage was taken to the landfill, any evidence would be irretrievable. After all this, Robert claimed he decided to stage a burglary, though in reality he had robbed his friend's home himself, stealing money and valuables, which he pawned the next day. The cruelty with which Robert disposed of his friend's bodies and the eerie calmness with which he recounted the events shocked even seasoned police officers. In his home, they found a saw and an axe stained with blood, skin, and bone fragments of the deceased. The accused hadn't even bothered to clean the tools or attempt to hide them, confident that the investigation would never lead to him since he had left no traces at the Codd's house. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owen's stove belonged to the missing couple. Law enforcement decided to delve deeper into the suspect's background. Robert was unmarried, had no children, and barely maintained any contact with his relatives. He had previously lived in Asheville, North Carolina, but in 2000 he bought land in Leicester and later built a house there. It turned out that his name was linked to an unresolved crime from 15 years prior that occurred in Asheville in 2000. Robert's close friend, Zeb Wayne Quinn, who was only 18 at the time, mysteriously disappeared. Robert and Zeb, longtime acquaintances from their school days, resided nearby and shared a friendship. Zeb, balancing military training with part-time work at Walmart, arranged to meet with Robert on January 2, 2000, following the conclusion of his Walmart shift. Their plan was to journey to Leicester to purchase a new car. However, Zeb failed to return home. Several days later, Zeb's Mazda protege was discovered parked elsewhere in town, its headlights illuminated, with a heart drawn on the window using red lipstick. Despite investigations, the car's owner remained unidentified. Furthermore, the vehicle exhibited damage and scratches, along with paint traces from another vehicle. Remarkably, Robert, the last person to see Zeb, also had damage on his car, with paint particles matching those from Zeb's vehicle. Robert recounted a peculiar and dubious account of their encounter. Soon after, they embarked towards Leicester, with Zeb signaling for Robert to stop. Zeb said he received a message on his pager and urgently needed to use a payphone. He asked Robert to wait and drove off to the nearest gas station, but returned 10 minutes later looking frantic. He said their plans had changed and then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting his friend's car in the process. It was also discovered that Zeb had a romantic relationship with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose former boyfriend, Wesley Smith, had threatened Zeb with harm if he didn't stop seeing Misty Taylor. Smith and Owens were questioned in this case, but due to a lack of evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had aliases, which was not the case for Robert. A significant amount of money, which Zeb had with him in case he decided to buy the car, and his pager disappeared from his car, and it was never determined what message he had received, if any. The investigation leaned towards the theory that there was no message at all. Another oddity was that the day after Zeb's disappearance, a man called Walmart claiming to be him, stating he wouldn't be coming to work for the next few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded strange and unfamiliar, not like Zeb at all. That phone call was traced to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. During questioning, Owens unexpectedly claimed that he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb sped away. No new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remained unsolved, with Zeb Quinn listed as missing ever since. However, 15 years after these events, Owens was interrogated again, suspected of being directly involved in his longtime friend's disappearance. In June 2015, the case of Zeb Quinn was reopened from the archives, and the investigation resumed. However, at first, it seemed unlikely that law enforcement would uncover any new information. Robert recounted the same story he had told back in 2000, indicating he had nothing new to add. Nevertheless, the police decided to conduct a more thorough search of his property, where they stumbled upon something very peculiar. In a detached concrete slab at Owen's home, a strangely walled-off cavity was discovered inside, which were small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged to undergo DNA analysis, so it was impossible to definitively determine if they belonged to the missing Quinn. A neighbor's interview provided even more unexpected results. An elderly man living nearby remembered something from January 2000 when young Owens had just purchased the land and was starting to build his house. One evening, he started a fire that emitted a sickly sweet, nauseating smell. The neighbor even confronted him because the wind was blowing the stench in his direction, nearly making him sick. Soon after, the fire pit was covered with concrete, which seemed highly unusual, but Robert claimed he planned to build a small fountain there, which he never did. The neighbor had forgotten about the foul-smelling fire until 15 years later when police showed up at the property. Ultimately, Owens confessed to being complicit in a crime, telling an entirely new story. According to him, Zeb was killed by his own uncle Walter Owens, who had been hired by Wesley Smith to eliminate Misty's new boyfriend, whom he still loved. Robert claimed he was unaware at the time, and his uncle had asked him to lure the young man to a secluded spot when the three of them ended up in a wooded area on the road to Leicester. The uncle ordered them to stop the car and then to signal Quinn to do the same. Once the young man stepped out, Walter shot him silently and then instructed his nephew to help dismember and package the body, which was burned on Robert's property that same night and encased in concrete. Interrogating Walter Owens was no longer possible as he had died several years before his nephew's horrific confession. No evidence was found at the supposed crime scene and the story sounded very unconvincing. Legal proceedings, plea agreement and final verdict. Initially, Robert faced charges of first-degree double murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment and concealment of evidence, burglary and robbery. All these charges could have led to the death penalty, but it was revealed that the defendant had long suffered from depression and mental disorders, taking powerful medication which his lawyer used as a foundation for defense. Thanks to a well-constructed defense strategy, the accused could have been found insane and sent to a psychiatric clinic instead of prison, which neither the prosecution nor the victim's relatives found satisfactory. At the same time, the investigation into Quinn's case began, from which the criminal might also escape unpunished. In 2017, the defendant agreed to a plea deal admitting guilt in the murder of the Codds in exchange for a guaranteed removal of the death penalty from potential sentences for this case. He was found guilty of second-degree manslaughter, dismemberment and incineration of bodies, burglary, and robbery. In total, he was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, Owens made another plea deal with the authorities, this time regarding Quinn's case. However, he only admitted to complicity in murder and assisting in hiding the evidence for this crime. He received an additional 12 years added to his already effectively life sentence. After the sentencing, the murderer addressed the court asking forgiveness from the relatives of the people he had killed. He again spoke of his innocence, attributing everything to an unfortunate accident and citing his mental disorder and the influence of strong medication which impaired his judgment. However, the relatives of Christy and Joseph Cord, as well as Quinn's family, did not believe him. Story 3. They have never reconciled with the term unintentional murder and believe that in both cases, the man acted deliberately and for selfish motives. I can't believe it. Oh my God, he killed her. Absolutely unbelievable that the court decided to grant him mercy even though he showed Celeste nothing. The more I was learning, the angrier I was becoming. There is nothing that is about the victim. The victim doesn't exist. I was made commitments, promises, and silly me, I believed it all. We're going to look at another troubling case. In many romantic comedies, it's common to see the main character chasing and even stalking the girl he likes. Eventually, she gives in to his persistence, realizes no one loves her like he does, and returns his feelings. On screen, this seems cute and funny, making the guy look like a true romantic willing to do anything for his love. But in real life, this behavior can have the opposite effect, scaring the person and even leading them to call the police. Celeste Mano's story started harmlessly. She was getting attention from a coworker, which she always ignored, hoping he would get the hint and leave her alone. Unfortunately, one careless action by Celeste changed everything, turning the admirer into an obsessive stalker. Another thoughtless act led to irreversible consequences. Celeste became genuinely fearful for her life, sought help from the police multiple times, and confided in friends about her concerns, but felt powerless and unsupported. This tragedy might have been avoided if the police hadn't waited for a crime to be committed before taking action. Let's examine this case closely and trace the events that led to the tragic end of this young woman. Who was Celeste Mano? Born Celeste Cristano on November 30th, 1997, in northeastern Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, she was the youngest of two children of Aggie Diaro and Tony Mano. She grew up with her older brother Alessandro. According to some sources, their father left when they were young, remarried, but stayed in contact and supported his children. In school, Celeste was social, active, and friendly. She played sports, danced, was the cheerleading team captain, and had big dreams. She initially wanted to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. But towards the end of her studies, she found law boring, switched to advertising and marketing, and in 2018 got hired by a large, fast-growing e-commerce company. Celeste was smart and talented, quickly mastering her job, and rose from a call center worker to head of a department in just a few years. She was seen as one of the most promising employees. Everyone admired Celeste for her intelligence, initiative, and ability to organize work efficiently. Besides her professional skills, Celeste had a striking appearance and a flawless figure. During her university years, she even competed in the university beauty contest and placed among the top 3. She was used to significant male attention from a young age, but was very particular in choosing her partners. At the company, a colleague named Lou Nader, who was almost 16 years older than Celeste, took a keen interest in her from the moment she started. Lou was quite reserved and unsociable, with no apparent career ambitions, having stayed in the same minor position for a long time. Celeste, being kind and open, didn't want to hurt Lou's feelings and always politely declined his advances. Despite her rejections, Lou kept trying to get her attention in various ways. Celeste would sometimes joke to lighten the mood, but was clear that she wasn't interested. Lou misinterpreted Celeste's politeness as playing hard to get and decided he would win her over no matter what. His persistent and awkward advances became annoying, but Celeste kept her composure, hoping he would eventually give up or focus on someone else. Instead, Lou became obsessed with her and everyone around noticed his relentless pursuit. Celeste confided in a close friend that she would never consider a relationship with Lou. She found him odd and unpredictable, was not attracted to men without ambitions, and the significant age difference was also a factor. Despite his efforts, Lou stood no chance with her. His obsession even caused him to neglect his work duties, which led to 3 reprimands and warnings from senior management. Finally, in early autumn of 2019, Lou was dismissed for his poor performance. Lou was very upset when he was fired, almost crying as he packed his things. Celeste felt mixed emotions. She was relieved that he would stop bothering her, but also felt guilty, believing his dismissal was partly her fault. As a department manager, she thanked Lou for his service, escorted him to the exit, and tried to encourage him by patting him on the shoulder and sincerely wishing him luck. However, this seemingly harmless act turned out to be a fatal mistake. Lou interpreted Celeste's gesture as a sign that she had feelings for him but was afraid to start an office romance due to her position. With nothing left to hinder their relationship in his mind, Lou was convinced they could be together. Overwhelmed by his emotions, Lou unexpectedly kissed Celeste on the cheek. Stunned by his audacity, Celeste didn't know how to react. She hurried back into the office building without saying a word. This reaction convinced Lou that Celeste had feelings for him and that he shouldn't give up. A few days after being fired, Lou created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. Initially, she accepted it, thinking it was harmless. But when he started bombarding her with requests to meet and go out, she tried to politely decline before blocking him. The next day, Lou sent her another friend request from a new profile. Celeste ignored it, but he began commenting on her photos, praising her looks and suggesting they would make a great couple. She adjusted her profile settings so only friends could message or comment. During a family celebration, Celeste complained about the persistent pursuer, recounting the bizarre incident on the day he was fired. Her family listened but assumed it wasn't serious and that he would eventually lose interest. Lou didn't have Celeste's personal phone number as they had only communicated through work channels. But now, she started receiving strange romantic messages from an unknown number. She immediately guessed who they were from. Lou sent her romantic poems, admired her beauty, and tried to coax her into going out. Celeste answered his call once, trying to have a serious conversation to explain that nothing could happen between them and to persuade him to stop. However, Lou didn't listen and only commented on how pleasant her voice was and how glad he was that she had finally picked up. After this, Celeste tried to block Lou, but he called from new numbers each time. Eventually, she changed her number, but within a week, Lou somehow found it and continued his telephone harassment. This continued for about half a year as Celeste sought protection. Celeste tried to ignore her crazed admirer, blocking his numbers and fake social media pages, not responding to his messages and attempting to live her usual life. However, the messages kept coming and their tone gradually shifted from romantic to bold and threatening. Lou no longer asked to meet her. He demanded it, detailing delusional, intimate fantasies about what he would do with her. The situation worsened when Lou started following her from work to home, learning where she lived. At first, Celeste didn't realize he was physically stalking her. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but dismissed it as her imagination, a product of nerves. When she finally understood that Lou was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. Celeste asked the police to issue a special order prohibiting Lou from approaching her in her home. However, the officers were indifferent and even mocking. They told her that writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages wasn't illegal or punishable. Without evidence that Lou was following her, they asked her to leave the precinct and not hinder their efforts to catch real criminals. Despite her distress, she couldn't obtain the restraining order she desperately needed. For another 6 months, Celeste continued to suffer from Lou's relentless harassment. She frequently noticed his car parked across the street from her office during workdays and saw him driving past her house several times in the evenings. She constantly felt his gaze, making her nervous and tense. In August 2020, Celeste approached the police again, this time with photo and video evidence on her phone showing that Lou was indeed following her. A different officer took Celeste's statement, this time taking the situation more seriously and expressing surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised her to go to court immediately, where a restraining order was issued against Lou. He was notified that he could no longer call, approach, or try to contact her in any way. Clearly, Lou did not expect this turn of events and disappeared from Celeste's sight for a few weeks. For the first time in a long while, she felt free and believed that her harasser would no longer bother her. However, her relief was premature. Less than a month later, she began receiving messages from unknown numbers. In these messages, Lou first pleaded and then demanded that she retract her statement and remove the restraining order, claiming it interfered with their romantic relationship. After receiving several messages, Celeste immediately went to the police as Lou had violated the restraining order. This time, Lou was fined and warned that further violations would lead to much more severe consequences, including potential jail time. Following this, Lou did not make his presence known for almost 2 months, and Celeste hoped he had finally left her alone. In September 2020, Celeste met a young man named Chris Riedsdale, who was just a year older than her. They quickly discovered they had many common interests, views on life and goals leading to a romantic relationship. Celeste told Chris about the harassment from her former admirer and admitted that although Lou hadn't contacted her for over a month, she still felt anxious. Chris surrounded her with care and attention, doing everything he could to make her feel safe and worry-free. In early November, Celeste invited Chris to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Her family immediately liked Chris, and her mother even joked that Celeste was now in safe hands. The next few weeks passed peacefully, with no sign of Lou trying to contact Celeste or appearing in her life. The young woman was happy, spending all her free time with Chris, and it seemed she no longer worried about Lou bursting back into her life or harming her in any way. On November 15, 2020, the love-struck couple went out on a date, sitting in a cafe and enjoying each other's company. Celeste suggested they capture the moment with a selfie, which turned out very romantic. The couple was sitting at the same table, embracing, smiling, and looking very happy. Celeste liked the photo so much that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media to share news of her new relationship and signal that things were serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page with a touching caption about how he loved this girl and would do everything to keep her eyes sparkling with happiness, as they did in the picture. Unfortunately, this outing turned out to be the couple's last. On the evening of their date, Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, and they said goodbye, planning to meet the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen with her mother, talking about her boyfriend before heading to bed, since she had to get up early for work the next morning. On Monday, November 16, 2020, around 4 o'clock in the morning, Celeste's mother, Eggy, was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. At first, she didn't understand what was happening. Then she heard suspicious noises, banging, screams, and commotion. Initially, she thought the noises were coming from the street, but she soon realized they were inside the house. Eggy jumped out of bed, threw on her robe, and rushed to her daughter's room. She flung open the door and saw, in the dim light, someone literally jumping away from Celeste's bed before escaping through the broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was confronted with a horrifying scene. Her daughter was lying in a pool of her own blood, covered in cuts and small shards of broken glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, gasping for air, her eyes wide open and staring upward. Her mother immediately called emergency services and tried to stem the deep bleeding wounds on her daughter's body until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, it was too late to save her. By the time the police and doctors arrived, she had passed away. The medical examiners later found over 20 penetrating stab wounds on her body, with the fatal blow to her heart. Analyzing the situation and comparing the scene of the incident with Eggy's testimony, it was clear that Celeste's attacker had entered through the broken window. The police concluded that the assailant took less than 3 minutes to break into Celeste's room through the window and carried out the attack before her mother could enter. The suspect used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly. Celeste tried to defend herself, as indicated by the numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if her daughter had any enemies, Eggy could only recall one name, Lou Sacco, who had obsessively pursued Celeste for over a year, harassing her with calls and threatening messages. This information was corroborated by other family members, friends, and colleagues. At the scene, the suspect left a large number of bloody fingerprints, and DNA was found on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, as he had injured his hand. It was imperative to detain and interrogate Lou immediately as the prime suspect in the case and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Lou was arrested the same day, but initially denied his involvement, insisting that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, forensic results soon confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in the victim's room and on the fence were his. Law enforcement also pointed to the restraining order against approaching Celeste, which Lou had violated. Additionally, it was discovered that the evening before the tragedy, Lou had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store, as captured on surveillance camera at the checkout. He later used the hammer to break into the house through the window and the knife to fatally attack Celeste. The evidence against Lou was irrefutable, further underscored by his long-term surveillance of the victim, knowing virtually everything about her. However, the final trigger for him was the photo Celeste posted on social media with her new boyfriend. After seeing this, Lou went to the store, purchased a knife and a hammer, and under the cover of night went to Celeste's home to end her life. His actions were seen as deliberate and premeditated criminal activity, yet Lou's behavior was erratic, raising doubts about his mental stability. Notably, Lou, nearly 39 years old, had never married, continued to live with his parents, had almost no friends, and never held a job for long. People described him as nervous and introverted, with severe socialization issues. Additionally, Lou had a biological brother who was serving a lengthy sentence for a criminal act at that time. A forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered for Lou, and his attorney insisted that his client needed not imprisonment, but specialized treatment as he required professional help. This argument outraged Celeste's family, who feared that the cruel criminal might evade punishment. Psychiatric experts, after interviewing Lou and analyzing his behavior, concluded that he did indeed suffer from some mental disorders. However, at the time of the crime, he was fully aware of his actions and had prepared for the crime in advance, planning the details. This meant that Lou, despite his attempts to feign insanity, would undoubtedly have to face trial. In the autumn of 2023, 3 years after Celeste's tragic death, Lou finally appeared in court. During this time, he repeatedly tried to prove that he was mentally ill and therefore could not be convicted of deliberate criminal activity. He spent most of this period in a psychiatric clinic. In the courtroom, Lou behaved calmly and detachedly, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings around him. He admitted his guilt but insisted that he had not intended to end Celeste's life, merely to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found Lou guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no sooner than after 30 years. Celeste's parents repeatedly pointed out that their daughter had contacted the police as early as 2020, hoping for protection from Lou. However, her complaint was not accepted because, according to the existing legislation, only attempts to physically contact the victim were considered harassment, while online stalking and phone harassment were not criminally punishable. Throughout the 3 years of preparing for the trial, Celeste's mother, Eggy, together with professional lawyers and some activist organizations, worked on developing Celeste's law. This law aimed to introduce criminal liability for stalking on social networks through text messages and emails. Eggy believed this would help protect many women and girls and prevent the tragic fate that befell her daughter. She aimed to achieve significant changes in the existing criminal legislation and directly approached the Legislative Commission of Victoria. Eggy developed over 40 recommendations and amendments, but almost all of them were ultimately rejected. Investigations showed that in the vast majority of cases, online stalkers limit themselves to their invisible presence and do not seek to contact their victims in any other way. The amendments that were made only help to limit access to confidential information on social networks. In cases of severe stalking involving threats, a restraining order could be issued, similar to if the person were pursued in real life. However, here was still no criminal liability for such crimes currently. For such actions, a stalker might only receive a verbal warning, and upon repeated violations, they might be fined, though not always. Celeste's law has yet to be enacted. Story 4. I tried to get in from the door and there was a child dead. And yeah, we tried to do what we could to help. And unfortunately, we were too late. Hannah Clark. She had this strong desire to become a loving mother since she was young. This started with how she cared for her younger siblings. As she grew up, all she wanted was to be a great mom. She had so much energy and always had a big smile. Hannah was also quite competitive. She worked really hard to be successful in CrossFit competitions. She even won first place in Australia and fourth place in an international competition. But here's the interesting part. Alongside her competitive side, she was also really kind and nurturing. She brought this into her marriage and being a mom to her 3 kids. Alia, her 6-year-old daughter, was full of brightness and strength, just like Hannah. Then there was Liana, only 4 years old, who was all about fashion. And Trey, the 3-year-old, seemed to be a football prodigy. Hannah believed he was even better than kids twice his age. Her kids meant the world to her, and she wanted them to have the best life. The family lived in Brisbane, a big city in Australia known for its culture, art galleries, museums, and botanical gardens. It was a great place for a family like Hannah's. Hannah got married to a man named Rowan Baxter in 2009 when she was 21 and he was 32. Rowan was into fitness just like Hannah. He used to play rugby professionally and was really dedicated to his personal training work. Hannah and Rowan bonded over their love for exercise. They started off well, but their marriage went downhill over time. Hannah's mom noticed Rowan becoming more controlling, and his extreme training style caused concerns among friends. This harsh approach spilled into their relationship. Hannah's life had taken a difficult turn. She had to change how she dressed for the gym and avoid wearing her favorite pink clothes because her husband, Rowan, thought those colors weren't right for her. Rowan had a strong need to control things, including their marriage. He believed that wives should only be homemakers and provide physical intimacy. As time went on, Hannah's situation got worse, even though she denied being mistreated. Rowan's behavior towards Hannah was hurtful. He didn't show any care for her feelings or pain, simply telling her to be tougher. He criticized her appearance, even calling her names. Rowan was envious of Hannah's success as an athlete and trainer, feeling inferior that she excelled in areas where he struggled. Their marriage continued for a decade, but it wasn't a happy one. Rowan's infidelity became known to people, including his own family. Despite this, he projected a fake image of being a good person to the public, making others sympathize with him. Hannah's family saw through this facade, but Rowan isolated her from them, trying to keep his control intact. Rowan's grip on Hannah tightened over time, causing concern among those who cared about her. One of her friends, who worked in helping people facing abuse, tried to talk to her about Rowan's actions. Even though Hannah denied the abuse and threats, she did admit that Rowan had a history of threatening a previous partner. It's important to remember that no one should go through such a situation, and support is crucial for those facing abuse. Hannah, compelled by a growing urge to break free from her tumultuous relationship, confides in her friend, Menya. During their conversation, Hannah sheds light on the suffocating grip Rowan had over her life and their children. His overbearing control extended to demanding intimate moments from her daily. Refusal on her part would lead to him wielding emotional weapons, preventing her from enjoying activities she loved, be it going to the gym or spending quality time with her kids. What's astonishing is how Rowan used her passions against her, manipulating her vulnerabilities. He'd incessantly pry into her social media messages, baselessly accusing her of infidelity with any male name he stumbled upon. He didn't spare even those he personally knew from the gym. Rowan's manipulation didn't stop at accusations. He'd seize Hannah's money and blame her for his own actions, branding her as an irresponsible spender. In the midst of Hannah's distressing revelations, her friend Menya stepped in as a guiding light. With unwavering support, Menya meticulously laid out the stark reality of Hannah's situation. She painted a vivid picture of the emotional, intimate, and financial abuse Hannah was enduring. It wasn't love, nor was it healthy. It was domestic abuse. Armed with her friends' and family's backing, Hannah summoned her courage on December 5, 2018, and chose to escape Rowan's clutches after enduring 11 grueling years together. Hannah's departure was discreetly executed while Rowan was away from home, ensuring he couldn't wield his usual intimidation tactics. This shift in power dynamics transformed Rowan from a controlling figure into a menacing force, his loss of control sparking a fire that consumed him. Despite Hannah's noble attempts to keep things amicable for the sake of their children, Rowan's visits took a tense and aggressive turn. A chilling turn of events unfolded during one visit, where Rowan's aggression escalated to the point of him kidnapping one of their kids, leading to a 4-day ordeal. This pivotal moment marked a shocking shift in their narrative, as Hannah's bravery and determination clashed head-on with Rowan's unraveling behavior. So now he's trying to contact me over the phone. I understand, it's really frustrating. There's no issue with him spending time with the kids, that's not the problem. What's his name? This pattern, it's like he's fine for a moment and then suddenly he's not. Is this frustration coming from something specific? Or is it just because we're apart now? Well, there's been a lot of problems in our relationship, not physical fights, but emotional stuff, controlling behaviors and such. I just can't take it anymore. I've been talking to the police about maybe getting a restraining order, but I didn't because I was scared it might make things worse. I thought if I kept the kids with me, it might prevent situations like these. So you drop off or pick up the kids from Hannah, and she finds some pictures of her in your car. Then you grab her arm, and that's the basic information we know about this incident. Hannah was getting the kids ready after their visit, and you wanted them to stay overnight. But when she said no, you took our daughter from her and ran down the street, put her in the car, and drove away. Hannah had to involve the police to get our child back. Our child had to go through that because of you. Because of this, Hannah went to court and got a domestic violence order against you. She told you to be nice to her or you could be arrested. But that didn't stop you. You attacked Hannah in front of your friend's house, almost breaking her wrist. So now you're not allowed to come near Hannah for 20 meters, but you didn't care about that. You kept following her, sending her mean emails through your friends, calling her a bad wife and mom. Somehow, you knew where she was going, and you sent her strange messages and pictures of where she was. You even put a device in her home to listen to her. Then one of Hannah's friends went to the police. She was scared for Hannah's life. You had been saying that you were going to hurt her. Everyone who cared about Hannah was worried, even your own family. But the police said they couldn't do anything unless you actually hurt her. This choice by the police would lead to something really, really bad happening. Hannah was feeling crushed. She even mentioned casually that Rowan was attempting to end her life. She couldn't find a way to stop his strong grudge against her. Throughout this time, Rowan kept up a fake appearance on social media. He shared loving pictures of his kids and pretended to be a perfect man. He even acted like he couldn't live without his wife. His social media posts led people to send mean messages to Hannah, blaming her for leaving such a good and honest man. The mental pain Hannah went through after leaving Roan might have been worse than when they were together. But Hannah didn't give up. She was a tough woman and a devoted mom. She leaned on her family and friends, and their support meant a lot during those months. By the end of 2019, Hannah was feeling positive about the upcoming year. She told her sister-in-law that 2020 would be a great year. She was moving forward to a fresh life with her kids, a new life just for herself. On February 19, 2020, Hannah's hope was shattered again. She was putting her 3 kids in the car to take them to school. Suddenly, Roan appeared out of nowhere and got into the front seat. Hannah immediately told him to leave the car because he was breaking the court rules she had against him. It was then that she saw Roan was holding a knife and a container of gasoline. Worried about her children's safety, Hannah followed Roan's instructions to drive. While she drove, he poured the gasoline all over the inside of the car. The situation was getting out of control very fast. A mix of panic and intense feelings. It's hard to even imagine. Before Hannah could drive far, she spotted a man washing his car. She screamed for help and tried to get out of the car. But before the man could reach her, Roan got out of the car too. He lit a lighter and threw it into the car where Hannah and the kids were. The situation was terrifying. Hannah emerged from the car, her body engulfed in flames, her desperate cries begging for someone to rescue her children. Amid this horrific scene, an off-duty paramedic passing by noticed the chaos and quickly pulled over to help. Another person, who happened to be nearby, grabbed a hose usually used for washing cars and tried to douse the flames that had taken hold of Hannah. All the while, she never stopped shouting about her children who were still trapped inside the vehicle. In her agony, she wondered why she hadn't stayed with them, pleading for someone to save her babies. By the time the police arrived, Hannah had summoned all her strength to provide them with a detailed account of the events, even mentioning the domestic abuse order against someone named Roan. Tragically, Hannah's children had already lost their lives by the time the police got there. The car was completely consumed by fire, and it wasn't until later that anyone realized the children had been inside, secured in their seats. Hannah was on the ground, screaming for help, and I rushed over to assist her. Amidst her distress, she managed to tell me about the kids in the car. The news hit me hard, and I moved to approach the car, but a sudden explosion forced me back. My younger brother intervened, preventing me from getting closer. As the car erupted into an explosion, I looked around and realized it was around the time when kids were heading to school. The gravity of the situation sank in. There were children in that car. Suddenly, it came to a halt. I tried to open the door and saw a child inside who was no longer alive. We did everything we could to help, but tragically, it was too late. What's even more shocking is that on the other side of the road, the car's driver, who turned out to be the ex-husband of someone named Hannah, had taken his own life. He jumped out of the car to escape the flames that had engulfed it, and evidence of this was visible through an object protruding from his chest. The police were able to piece together exactly what happened. It seems that Hannah's ex-husband had meticulously planned this horrific event, leaving behind a letter outlining his intentions to end her life. This letter, which he started writing months prior, revealed a disturbed mind and a determination to control his family at any cost. Tragically, despite Hannah's fight for survival, she passed away a few days later. Her family held a public event to honor her memory and denounce the actions of her attacker. It's important for us to reflect on cases like this and consider how we can prevent such tragedies in the future. Let's have a discussion in the comments about your thoughts on this case and any ideas you have for avoiding similar situations. Story 5. Don't be afraid of violence. It's good for you. There's 3 things that make our existence, right? Art, fucking, and killing. So art, fuck, kill. This is John Battaglia, 62 years old, on death row for nearly 16 years. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 2004 for a horrible crime against 2 innocent people. After many failed appeals, his time ran out in February 2018. Join us as we explore the shocking story of John Battaglia. Before we begin, we extend our deepest sympathies to the loved ones of Faith and Liberty Battaglia, who fell victim to the terrible acts in this case. To understand death row inmate John Battaglia, we need to look back at his life and the decisions that led him here. Mary Jean Pearl met divorced John Battaglia in 1990 and found him handsome and charismatic. John was a military brat who moved around the US and Europe until his father left the military in 1970, settling the family in Texas. After making some bad decisions, John joined the Marines but later left to become an accountant. He moved back to Texas where he became a successful CPA. John was previously married to Michelle Guy from 1985 to 1987, with whom he had a daughter named Christ. That marriage ended in divorce. Mary Jean Pearl was a prominent antique dealer with a successful family business and managed rental properties. She came from a wealthy Texas family and had an upbeat, extroverted personality. John and Mary Jean dated for a while and married on April 6, 1991. They lived in an upscale neighborhood in Highland Park, Texas, in a beautiful house that Mary Jean's father generously bought for them. They enjoyed a wealthy lifestyle with all its perks. Their life seemed even more perfect when their first daughter, Mary Faith Battaglia, was born in 1992. Their second daughter, Liberty May Battaglia, followed in 1995. The girls were complete opposites. Faith was a tomboy who loved climbing trees and getting dirty, while Liberty preferred frilly dresses and tea parties. Despite their differences, the girls adored each other and got along well. They also loved their half-sister, Christ, who loved them in return. John adored his daughters, and they were in love with their father. He never spanked them or spoke harshly to them. John was charming, generous, and fun. Everyone loved him, but there was something deeply troubling inside him. He had a dark side that he usually kept hidden, but it would occasionally surface. Mary Jean first noticed this dark side on their wedding night, when John snapped at her. It was the first red flag for Mary Jean, though there had been previous warning signs before their marriage. John had told Mary Jean that he had once hit his ex-wife during an argument, but he didn't reveal the full extent of his abuse. The abuse had started when Michelle was pregnant with Christ and escalated after their separation in 1986. John had physically assaulted Michelle several times, once putting her in the hospital for days. Over time, things got worse for Mary Jean. Heated arguments would escalate into horrendous verbal abuse from John, sometimes lasting up to half an hour. Mary Jean begged John to seek help from professionals, but he didn't think he needed it. He believed nothing was wrong with him and blamed Mary Jean, thinking it was her fault. So Mary Jean endured the abuse, hoping to keep her family together. However, after one incident nearly turned physical, she couldn't take it anymore. In January 1999, the couple separated, and Mary Jean told John to move out. 9 years of emotional and verbal abuse had become too much, and she hoped he would seek help. John Battaglia was haunted by his own past. He grew up in an abusive environment with a father who ruled with an iron fist and a mother who was an alcoholic with mental disorders. His mother eventually committed suicide in 1972. In 2000, John and Mary Jean finalized their divorce. Mary Jean still hoped John would get help for his anger issues, thankful that he had never directed his wrath toward their daughters. After the divorce, John's anger and resentment grew. One Christmas morning, John came to pick up his children for the day, accompanied by his daughter, Christ, from a previous marriage. They planned to go to church, but an argument between John and Mary Jean escalated into a physical assault. In a fit of rage, John knocked Mary Jean to the floor, kicking and repeatedly hitting her on the back of the head. His daughters watched in horror, begging him to stop. John finally left, and Mary Jean called 911. John was arrested and charged with misdemeanor assault. He pleaded guilty and received 2 years of probation with the condition of no contact with Mary Jean, which meant he couldn't see his daughters for a while. Despite the probation, John continued to leave harassing and hateful messages on the answering machine Mary Jean had placed in the girls' bedroom. Mary Jean reported this harassment to the police and John's probation officer. Due to violating his probation, a warrant for John's arrest was issued on May 2, 2001, and he was advised to turn himself in. He agreed, but wanted one more evening with his 2 daughters. John was supposed to bring the girls to the police station after one last evening with them, but this decision proved to be a tragic mistake. That evening, he picked up his daughters as usual, and instead of going out to dinner, he drove them to his place at the Adam Hatz Lofts. Mary Jean had no idea what was about to happen. Mary Jean hated taking the girls to see John because she knew how much they dreaded the visits. Liberty even hid under the bed to avoid going. However, Mary Jean was bound by a court order to comply with the visitations. The girls begged her not to make them go, but she had no choice. Terrified of John, Mary Jean would meet him in a public parking lot to hand over the girls. She couldn't defy the court order, no matter how much she wanted to protect her daughters. The last thing Mary Jean saw was her daughters' faces pressed against the car window, waving goodbye. She had planned to go to a meeting, but decided to visit her friend Melissa instead. When she arrived, Melissa told her to call her mother. Her mother informed her that the girls wanted to talk to her, so Mary Jean called John's number. John put the phone on speaker, and the first voice Mary Jean heard was Faith's, asking why she wanted to put their daddy in jail. Then the call turned into a nightmare. Mary Jean heard her daughters' voices, filled with confusion and fear. John Battaglia went through numerous appeals, reaching the Supreme Court with stays of execution and multiple competency hearings and evaluations by 4 experts. Finally, his execution was set for October 13, 2017, and later rescheduled for February 1, 2018. Despite previous halts to his execution on claims of mental incompetency, the prosecutor who tried his case insisted that Battaglia, a former accountant with a master's degree, was far from incompetent. "We provided him a fair trial with a fair jury," the prosecutor said. "They rendered the appropriate verdict, and after years of appeals, it's time to close this out. He just needs to go." Mary Jean Pearl, the mother of the 2 girls, attended the execution in Huntsville, as reported by CBS 11 News. 16 years after his sentencing, John Battaglia died by lethal injection. During his 2002 trial, 3 defense psychiatrists testified that Battaglia had bipolar disorder. In 2014, his surviving daughter from his first marriage told the Dallas Morning News that her father was also diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. John Battaglia felt he was the victim. While on death row, Battaglia gave several interviews, which fed his narcissistic ego. He spoke about his first wife, Michelle, and laughed while recounting the assault on her, blaming her for the incident. "When I attacked Michelle, I wouldn't really call it an attack," he said. "I just held her by the shoulder and popped her in the head twice. She moved her head the wrong way, and I snapped her nose." Michelle described the assault differently. "The first blow hit my eye, and it felt like my eye hit the back of my head. Then he broke my nose. As I fell, he kept hitting and kicking me." Attacked Michelle? "I wouldn't really call it an attack. Went up to her while she was walking down the sidewalk, and I said, 'You're gonna have to learn this lesson.' I just held her by the shoulder, and I popped her in the head twice. She moved her head the wrong way, and I snapped her nose. The first blow that he hit me was in my eye, and it was like I felt my eye hit the back of my head and come forward. Then he hit my nose, which broke my nose. The bone punched through right here. She fell down, and I just walked away. She said I struck her about 20 times, but she was unconscious before she hit the ground. Then my jaw, which dislocated my jaw, and then I had like a big bruise here. As I fell, he just kept hitting. Once I hit the ground, then he just started kicking. Well, the fact that she got me put in prison, she knows that the bullshit she pulled, the only way to keep from sending her front teeth flying out her asshole, is to have me behind this glass because she's a bitch and she deserved to have the shit knocked out of her, but you know what the hell." However, his eldest daughter knew the real truth about her father. "For divorce, I knew she was going to betray me, and that betrayal would probably lead to all of our deaths, so I went and got their names. Everything was very well hidden from me until that Christmas, when he beat up Mary Jane in front of me. Then I knew," she continued. "I mean, he had never laid a hand on me. He rarely even yelled at me." John spoke about his daughters as if he had fond memories of them, almost as if they were going to get ice cream at the end of the day. completely ignoring the fact that he had a hand in their deaths. A good father to liberty and faith. Yes, I tried to be. Oh gosh, my fondest memory of my daughters. Well, I have another daughter, she's 30 now, Christy. When we used to all get together and go somewhere, it was a kind of a little bit of a three-ring circus, if you can imagine. Three highly energetic, fun little girls just having a great time. Faith was a tomboy. She played soccer, didn't want to wear a dress. Now Liberty was in a princess costume almost every day. When asked about his execution date, John seemed almost cheerful, like he was having a casual conversation. He didn't seem fazed at all. Oh, what are my feelings towards my execution day? Yeah, it's 2 weeks today, Wednesday, so it'll be on Wednesday the 30th. It's a way to get out of here. Say, I'm ready to be executed. I don't want to be, because especially now that I'm speaking to my daughter, I like that. But, as far as like mentally prepared, yeah, it's not going to be that big deal. It's better than getting snuck up by somebody and shot in the back or killed in a car crash and, chopped up the hamburger meat or dying in some stupid son of a bitch's war in some place. So, of all the possibilities, it's not that bad. It's very clean and they're very nice to you. John talked about his daughters, but seemed detached as if he wasn't responsible for their murders. There didn't seem to be any real emotion. Yeah, the charge is capital murder for my two daughters, Faith and Liberty, in 2001. When asked about his last statement, John was flippant, cruel towards Mary Jean and accusatory towards others who might be at his execution. His eldest daughter still struggles to deal with it all. I always knew once it happens, it's done. This is the final chapter of the story. Finally, I might be able to move on, shedding the label of being the girl whose dad is on death row. Oh, have I thought about my last statement? Yeah, I've run a couple different ones by, I thought of Soylent Green as people, and then bring an image of Charlton Heston in and say, hang on to your Second Amendment rights, vote for Trump, say something derogatory about my poor ex-wife, tell my daughter I love her, but I'm not having any witnesses there, so I'm not really concerned about it, There's going to be a couple little cocksuckers from the DA's office who I could give a shit about, They enjoy that because they have small penises and smaller egos, so watching somebody else be killed because they're not man enough to do it themselves, what do I care about those little piss ants? John speaks about his final moments and the execution chamber as if discussing a mundane task, not his imminent death. What will it feel like when the warden comes for me and takes me to the gurney at Huntsville? Sure, there might be a touch of anxiety, but beyond that, it's probably going to be interesting. How many people experience this? Odd? Yes. Scary? Not really. What's there to fear? On February 1st, 2018, John Battaglia was secured to the gurney in the execution chamber, and four poised to deliver the lethal dose. John acted as if he were the star at a farewell event. He even inquired about the attendance at his send-off. On the victim's side, Mary Jean was present. On John's side, not a single supporter. Spotting his ex-wife, he managed one last dig. Well, hi, Mary Jean. I'll see you later. Bye. He then told the warden, go ahead, please. The injection of pentobarbital, a method causing the central nervous system to shut down similarly to a barbiturate overdose, commenced. With the warden's signal, the forecatheter released the fatal dose. Within about 5 minutes, it would complete its work. John lifted his head, looking at the chaplain. Am I still alive? Grinning, he sighed. Oh, here I feel it, before smiling and closing his eyes. The lethal dose of pentobarbital used in Texas executions brought death in 22 minutes by 9:40 p.m. Mary Jean observed before moving to the back of the room, returning at the end to confirm the monster was truly gone. John Battaglia wasn't destined to be a husband or father. His inner demons prevailed, and he refused help to banish the evil within. He will be remembered only for the pain, destruction, and death he wrought. There will be no memorials in his honor, no family burial in a known cemetery. His cremated remains are unaccounted for. Story 6. Paula Andrea Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela. Her mother, Andrina Bermudos Milan, was from Machorina, Managas. Her father, Leonardo Salazar, was from Tucupitu, a town in the state of Delta Emisero. A year after Paula was born in September 2016, the couple decided to immigrate with their child to Ecuador. They were looking for a better life for themselves and their daughter. A month after moving to Quito, capital of Ecuador, relationship in the family deteriorated for a number of reasons. Andrina decided to break up with Leonardo and soon moved to Cuenca, the third largest city in Ecuador. She took Paula with her. In Cuenca lived the mother of her best friend, who kindly offered to let her and the girl stay in the house while they found another place to live and work. Leonardo, the girl's father, given the breakup and other circumstances, decided to return to Venezuela, to his hometown of Tucupitu, and after a while immigrated again, this time to Trinidad, Tobago. At that time, Leonardo had already been disabled for a long time. The man's left arm had been completely disabled after an accident he had suffered while driving a motorcycle at a very young age. Since the man could not use his left arm, it was apparently difficult for him to find a good job even in Ecuador's capital city. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she almost completely stopped communicating with Leonardo, only informing him once that she has taken a job on a farm in Tapacundo. A few months after separating from Leonardo, Andrina entered into new romantic relationship with a man named Washington Andreas Imero. Andreas was a local Ecuadorian, and more importantly, he was the owner of the farm where Andrina worked. The man grew up in a wealthy family. When Paula was about a year and a half, Andrina moved to a man together with Paula. Andreas and Andrina had a child together on April 7, 2019. With a newborn baby, family became happier and more united. However, everything changed when an event happened on March 27, 2020. Completely changed the lives of everyone involved. At the time, family was living well, enjoying every day, and things were going well on the farm. On one such day, as happy as it seemed, Andreas took Paula and by car went with her to the flower plantations. On the way there, girl got very sick. She became dizzy and began to vomit. Andreas had no choice but to stop at a public restroom. As soon as he and the girl entered it, Paula vomited again. He decided to leave her alone for a few minutes and went back to the car to find a change of clothes, since the girl's clothes were all dirty. When Andreas returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. The man immediately pulled the girl out, tried to give her first aid, and soon brought her to the hospital. When the 4-year-old girl was handed over to doctors, she no longer showed any signs of life. Doctors stated, Paula dead. After the doctors on duty performed an initial examination and assessed the girl's condition, they realized that the story Andreas told them was full of inconsistencies. For example, the doctors determined at the first glance that the girl had bruises on her body and face, the nature of which could not be attributed to the information her foster father told them. Medical protocol in such cases requires doctors to contact the police. Indeed, the situation itself suggested this. Shortly after the police arrived, Andreas was arrested as a suspect in Paula's murder. Although Andreas said Paula has drowned in the toilet bowl, the autopsy of the body revealed something much darker. First of all, the test showed that the girl had been dead for about 24 hours when she arrived at the hospital, which doesn't fit with the man's version of events. The girl's foster father claimed that he gave Paula first aid and cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and that it all happened just 20 minutes before he took her to the hospital. On the other hand, the autopsy found that the girl has several broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which caused her death. It became apparent that Paula's death was not an accident, as her small body has a significant number of both recent and old injuries. Leonardo Salazar, the girl's father, learned of Paula's death on March 30th, 3 days after the events. His mother, who was still in Venezuela, had informed him of his daughter's death by the phone. She herself, in turn, learned it from Andrina's friend. It should be mentioned that after Leonardo has left Ecuador and Andrina had started a new relationship, she stopped all communication with him. That is why for 3 days Leonardo didn't know anything about her tragedy. Until that time he could see her only through the pictures Andrina and his mutual friends had sent him. In addition, Andrina blocked Leonardo in all social media, preventing him from communicating with Paula. She also cut off communication with almost all of Leonardo's relatives. Andrina even turned almost all of their mutual friends against the girl's birth father, telling them about his lack of desire to communicate with Paula, and so Leonardo was able to learn of his daughter's death. However, Andreina's family informed him of an alternative cause of death. They told him that Paula died of complications caused by COVID. At the time, Ecuador, like the rest of the world, was under quarantine due to the pandemic. At the time, however, there were virtually no deaths from the coronavirus in the country. Leonardo was undoubtedly very suspicious that his daughter might have died from COVID, so he immediately began researching statistics on death from the virus in Ecuador. The statistics were posted on social media and news websites. Leonardo immediately noticed that there were no children among the few victims of the coronavirus in Ecuador. Leonardo's relatives helped him to investigate, and one of them soon sent him a newspaper article that mentioned the arrest of Andreas, who was suspected of killing Paula. Leonardo then began calling Andreina daily, and it wasn't until 10 days later that she decided to call him back herself. In that conversation, Andreina rather coldly informed Leonardo that Paula had died of COVID, and that she could not give him more information because her lawyers had forbidden her to do so. The next step Leonardo took was to create a Facebook page together with an acquaintance of his dedicated to Paula, as well as an Instagram profile called Justice for Paula. The published posts caused a huge backlash across social media. Their main goal was to bring those responsible for his daughter's death to justice. On the same day that Andreina called Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to begin dealing with her daughter's funeral, even though the prosecutor, who worked on the case, asked for more time to investigate the body, but the girl's funeral took place on April 10, 2020. Andreina simply did not allow a second autopsy to be performed on the girl. Thanks to the information posted on social media, Andreina's friends, people in her circle contacted Leonardo and told him about the sad life Paula had in the years before her death. They sent Leonardo the information they had, most of which was based on isolated recordings of conversations, photos, audio recordings, and similar things. According to witnesses, ever since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, girl had to endure abuse from her stepfather, as well as her own mother. Not only did Andrea allow her daughter to be treated this way, but she herself was directly involved in all of this. Everyone said that they only saw Paula happy and cheerful when she was playing alone. In the presence of her stepfather, the girl looked depressed, acted shy, and became suddenly very frightful. At one point, the little girl told people she knew that her mother and stepfather beat her because of she misbehaved. One day, she even confessed that as punishment. Andreas pushed her and she hit her head on the wall. Paula called her stepfather nothing less than a monster and was undoubtedly very afraid of him. The little girl constantly had nightmares, and as a young child she already suffered from insomnia. The couple initially preferred that the girl, who was 2 years old at the time of moving into the stepfather's home, sleep alone. When falling asleep, she often cried, but no one paid any attention to her. In addition, her mother and stepfather forced her to tuck in on her own, without help. Moreover, her mother, Andreina, had been teaching her how to cook since she was 2 years old. This was something out of the realm of reason. Paula was forced to cook her own breakfast and dinners, because her mother liked to sleep in the mornings and take a break from the baby in the evening. She simply didn't want to take care of her daughter. Not only that, Andreina was not bothered by the fact that the girl has to cope with baking oven by herself, despite the dangers. At the preschool, where mother had placed Paula, girl constantly complained of pain in her legs and back and often stated that she could not walk. Her constant complaints, as well as the bruises on her body, forced the teacher to show her to the doctors at the health center. After an examination, they concluded that the girl was being mistreated in the family. The girl's teachers then called the special police organization so they could investigate the girl's abuse in her family. Officials took up the case and decided to send the girl somewhere she could be safe while the investigation process was underway. As a result, on October 16, 2019, Paula was temporarily transferred to her uncle, Andreina's brother. A hearing on the case was set for December 4, 2019. Unfortunately, the teachers who were supposed to testify never showed up. For whatever reason, they were unable to attend this hearing. As a result, it was decided to schedule a retrial for February 27, 2020. But even this time, Paula's teachers simply did not show up. The court was forced to dismiss all charges against Paula's parents and then she was returned to her mother. Exactly 1 month later, on March 27th, the girl died. And the exact reason the teachers did not want to attend either of the two hearings is still unknown. It is speculated that Andrena may have bribed the teachers or simply convinced them that although the girl had some problems, the parents were not responsible for what their daughter said about them. After Paula's death, Andreas was placed in protective custody for the duration of the investigation, but he soon appealed this decision. As a result, a hearing was held on June 12, 2020, in which the judge set a restraining order and also determined that the man could be released to house arrest. But during the hearing, which was held via video conference, Andreas announced that he was dropping his appeal at the time Leonardo was still engaged in a social media campaign. He also asked his subscribers for financial support to be able to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. He wanted to file a complaint against Andrena, Paula's mother, before it was too late. At the time, Andrena had not yet been charged and was free. Fortunately, Leonardo was able to obtain sufficient financial aid, as well as free legal advice from two Ecuadorian lawyers, Osvaldo and Alejandro, who unselfishly offered him support and assistance in the lawsuit. Leonardo had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela. He had to risk his life, float on a raft, and then cross the entire border from Nacharan to San Cristobal. He had to book private transfers, since the pandemic had canceled all services, and he could not use the usual routes to get to Ecuador. Because of the pandemic situation, all maritime and land borders of Venezuela were closed, so only few regular flights to 4 or 5 countries could be counted in the following months. Once Leonardo arrived in the state of Taquira, he had to cross the border into Colombia over rugged terrain, dangerous in itself. He then took a bus to the town of Ipaliso and continued on, through the hills and plains, to the Rumichic Bridge, the border between Colombia and Ecuador. Then Leonardo took a cab and drove to Quiros. On June 30th, he had a meeting with a lawyer. Immediately upon arrival, father of the deceased girl filed a complaint against the ex-girlfriend, to also be considered as a suspect in Paula's murder. On July 6, 2020, Andreas was indicted and a woman appeared in court, which stated that she should not be remained in custody and the house arrest would be sufficient and that she had to report to justice twice a week. As a result, both Andreas and Andrena were charged with murder. The maximum punishment for which in the Ecuadorian Penal Code was about 13 years in prison. In November 2020, the first hearing in the case was held. At the time, a specific date for the start of the trial was still to be announced. During the hearing, Leonardo's attorney spoke to their concern about Andrena's possible escape, as she had previously attempted to take her own life with pills. They also applied for Andrena to be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. The judge decided to grant the lawyer's request and also reduce the number of days the suspect had to appear in court to once a week instead of 2. However, a few days later, Andrena demanded to reconsider the decision of the necessity of wearing an electronic bracelet. On November 16th, another hearing was held to reconsider these decisions. Undoubtedly, all these details delayed the trial, but fortunately, the judge was able to set a date. It was set for December. The trial of Andreas and Andrena did not receive extensional media coverage. However, much of the information somehow made its way onto social media. And yet, because of the pandemic, which was a major topic in the information field, some of the facts went unreported. The trial began on January 14, 2021. At the time, there still wasn't any decision made about Andrena's alternative ways of imprisonment, and Andreas was held in the Regional Detention Center. The trial was held behind closed doors, and no representative of the media was present. In addition, some of the participants connected to the hearing via video link. According to the doctor who performed the autopsy on the girl, Paula had nearly all of her spinal discs rebuilt. Some of her ribs were broken, and some had already fused. This meant that the girl has broken ribs before, which had eventually healed on their own. She also had nail stigmata, a condition in which the nails grow into the skin, bruises and scratches on her face and body, fluid accumulation in her lungs, scars on her head and lacerations on her colon. According to the assessment, it was the later injuries that caused the infection to develop and gradually lead to sepsis, which ultimately caused death. The autopsy report also confirmed that by the time Paula was taken to the hospital by Andreas, She had been dead for about 24 hours. The amount of internal and external injuries reflected the level of cruelty to which the little girl had been subjected, as well as the level of carelessness shown by her guardians, who had never once taken her to the doctors. On top of this, the girl was malnourished, underweight, and too diminutive for her age, with mineral and nutritional deficiencies. Regarding Paula's injuries, Andrena, the girl's mother, tried to convince her family friends that the child has a lot of psychological problems, that the consequence of these problems was a tendency to self-torture, through which Paula tried to attract attention to herself. According to the girl's mother, when her younger brother was born, Paula began to lack parental attention, stopped sleeping at night, and tried to manipulate everyone through crying. The trial also revealed that in October 2019, when Paula was supposed to remain in her uncle's custody, according to the board's decision, she actually continued to stay at her parents' house and only slept at her uncle's house for a few nights. In other words, the measures taken by the police organization did not have the desired effect. In turn, it was possible to establish that in 2017, only a few months after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador, the girl began to suffer from abuse. It most likely began immediately after Andrena entered into relationship with Andreas. The trial was attended by more than 40 witnesses of the accusing party, who were able to confirm the fact that Paula had to endure abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the last hearing, before the judge handed down the verdict, Andrena stated that she took sole responsibility for the child's abuse. The woman claimed that she herself had beaten Paula with a belt and at times with her fists. Through this statement, the girl's mother actually attempted to remove blame from her man. She said directly that he was innocent, that he had nothing to do with it, and that he had never mistreated Paula. Andrena also stated that she chastised her daughter for causing her problems with her new husband. Breaking up with her new husband meant being back on the street and losing the financial stability she could only have around this man. Taking care of her daughter was her last priority. After becoming acquainted with Paula's life situation, the judges were concerned about the couple's newborn son, but it's safe to say that this child, unlike Paula, was never abused. It must be said that Andreas has indeed chosen to exercise his right to remain silent and has never made any statement about the incident since his arrest. By the February 3, 2021, Paula's trial was finished and the couple was sentenced. Both defendants were found guilty of murdering the girl. The maximum sentence for this crime is 13 years. Leonardo's original attorneys and the accusing party demanded exactly the maximum punishment for the perpetrators. But the chief judge decided to take into account an aggravating factor, namely that Paula was only 4 years old, which means that she could not defend herself against her attackers. As a result, the judge sentenced Andrena and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. According to Ecuadorian law, the convicts have 3 days to appeal the verdict, so the couple was expected to appeal immediately. Even though Andrena was sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison, she still remained on house arrest and not went to jail. The fact is that the woman used her opportunity to appeal, so now the higher court needs to confirm her sentence for incarceration. In the meantime, the woman continues to comply with the measures that were originally taken. This is not the case with Andreas, as he was arrested at the time of his appearance at the hospital with a dead girl. Undoubtedly, the fact that Andrena is still at large is causing public indignation and anger, most importantly, the anger of Leonardo, who is worried that the woman might take advantage of the situation to escape justice. And the night deepens. Thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.